Welcome to the Travel Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Vandenberg. On our show, I interview and connect with leaders across travel, hospitality, and tourism. We talk leadership in our industry, what has shaped them, successes, failures, and everything in between. Today, I'm speaking with Ali Gill, Marketing Director at Uncommon Hospitality. The Travel Leader is brought to you by the Travel Leader Coach, a leadership coaching and content company. We help established, high-performing travel leaders and teams improve leadership competencies. Learn more at www.travelleadercoach.com. Welcome, Ali. It's so great to see you today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really exciting to kick the year off with this.
Yes, absolutely. So we have met through the New England Inns and Resorts Association, and you've been a participant of my retreat, Accelerate Women Leaders in Travel. It's been so great to get to know you, and I'm looking forward to learning more about who you are as a leader today. So to get us started, what is the red thread throughout your travel and hospitality career?
Honestly, I kind of feel like the red thread has been being uncomfortable. And maybe a better way to say that is like taking a lot of risks. But I feel like pretty early on, I knew what I wanted. And so I really went after it. And that put me into a lot of situations that, made me feel uncomfortable, but that wasn't enough to stop me because I knew early on that I loved to write. And so I looked for any opportunity to do that. I wrote for local newspapers and my high school paper and my college paper, and I got the chance to interview a lot of really interesting and intimidating people, like Richard Curtis, who directed Love Actually. And when I was like 17 or 18, I was interviewing the Iraqi ambassador to the U.S. and I
Wow.
learned a lot and I made a lot of mistakes. But I just really started to lean into being uncomfortable because I read somewhere that the more you push yourself out of your comfort circle, the larger your circle gets. And it took me a while to really believe that that was true, but it is. And there are a lot of things that I can do now that I feel comfortable doing that I didn't a few years ago. And so, yeah, I continued to push myself. I moved to Italy and studied there and took a food writing course. And that sort of shifted my love of writing into a love of writing about food. And then I moved to Australia on my own when I was 20 and did a lot more food writing and then was looking for jobs. And I interviewed with yahoo.com and actually interviewed for a position with their finance writing team and had no interest in finance, didn't really know anything about finance. And it was a terrible interview. But I think they saw my passion, they saw my writing background, and they actually offered me a position with their lifestyle team, which was really great and a much better fit for me.
hmm
But I did that for a bit and then did a lot more unpaid or barely paid writing jobs. But really kept putting myself out there to get bylines and to get experience and to start building my resume. And then eventually I had an interview with a restaurant group that was looking for a graphic designer. That was also something that I didn't really know how to do, but it seemed like a really cool company. And so I got an
hmm
interview and I went anyway, and I just sort of told them what I could do. Um, and again, it was like it was a similar thing. They said, "Oh, well, you're not right for this job, but we like what you've done and who you are, and we have been thinking about creating a marketing and events assistant role, and we think that you would be good for that." And so I was able to just sort of like sneak my way in that way too. Although I had never done any marketing at that point, so I said yes. I figured I would just learn as I went, and found out what
Yeah.
marketing is and fell in love with it and had a really good 4 years with that restaurant group, working with some really cool fine dining places and casual spots too. And then after 4 years, I felt like it was time to get uncomfortable again. So my husband and I, we saved up and then we quit our jobs without a plan. And then we ended up moving back to the US and took a year off and took my dad's Subaru and traveled around the country for a while. Went to Europe and just sort of took advantage of that time. And then eventually decided to come to Portland, Maine. And then when I got here, I just sort of networked like crazy, trying to figure out something
Mhm.
that I could do, and ended up doing brand design and social for consumer packaged goods for a while, which was also new to me, but I learned a lot. And then just really wanted to get back into hospitality and decided to give hotels a try versus restaurants. And then met my now boss and told him I hadn't worked with hotels before, but that I was willing to learn and try really hard, and was able to get a job with a company that I now work for, Uncommon Hospitality. So it was it's been a lot
That's
of like saying yes and then working like
yeah.
hell to figure out what I'm doing.
Yeah, I love how you just like drew the map of that, journey you've made from writing and your skills in writing and just going after different opportunities to stretch your capabilities in new environments and new locations, new industries, and that just brought you serendipitously to hospitality,
Yeah.
and where you are today. You certainly are not afraid to jump into something new. That's wonderful to see, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's something that I would not have necessarily expected of myself. Like I am a more introverted person, and so it doesn't come naturally to me, but I get ideas in my head, and if I know what I want, I'm gonna figure out a way to
Yeah,
make it happen.
yeah. What do you think you've learned about yourself in that process of stretching your comfort zone?
I think that I have learned a lot about flexibility, which has been an important lesson for me because I am pretty type A. I like to have a plan, and especially with my work, I like to know how things are going to play out, and I'm very strategic that way. But I mean, things do not always go to plan, and you have to really be able to move and shift. And so I've learned that I can do that, and lean into it, and also that I'll be okay in new situations and new places. That it's really hard. It's daunting to move to different countries and go to new places and to change your job. But the more you do
Yeah.
it, you realize you can.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a big confidence builder too when you every time you do something new and you feel successful at it, that yeah, it gives you that confidence boost.
It does. It doesn't always make it easier, but it does.
Right, right. It's well, that's why it's uncomfortable, right? How would someone who you work closely describe you as a leader?
Um, I am lucky enough in my role where when I have my annual review, my boss talks to my peers too to get their sense of me. And so I think I have heard a lot of great feedback from them, which is really helpful. And they have often said that I am a good listener and that I am very intentional and mindful, especially with my work. I really think things through, and I've also heard that I am very positive, and able to spin negatives into positives. And I think that's a common theme. Like uh, I think it's good to try and make each day a 10 out of 10. So, you're always just trying your best and trying to make things, as positive as they can be without going overboard. And I do have pretty high standards, and I think that's good. I mean, I work for a small family business, and so we have high standards for ourselves, and that carries into my leadership
Yeah.
style too.
Yeah. Just to touch upon that idea of being a good listener, I'm actually thinking a lot about right now about the importance of communication in teams. And I think, we often think about communication as what we, communicate verbally to other people. What's the importance of being a good listener in that interaction and the idea of communication for you?
I think that you have to hear what's being said, but you also have to hear what's not being said. And
Mm,
and then you and that means you have to know your team pretty well to understand when they're maybe not comfortable telling you the whole story. Um,
mhm,
so it's really it's listening, and it's like knowing how they like to communicate too. Like I know myself, I need to think about things a little bit more before I talk.
mhm.
And so if you know that about some of your team members too, it's important to give them those opportunities, whether it's in like one-on-one meetings, just sort of, factoring in that extra time to encourage them to share, or if it's in group settings too, sometimes having activities where people are able to write down their thoughts too and then share, one by one, so that it's not always the loudest person in the room who is the one talking. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just really important to figure out exactly what people are trying to say, even if they're not distinctly saying it with
Right.
their words.
Yeah, so that idea of listening to understand
Yeah,
somebody and kind of customizing your approach so that you can really get to the bottom of what is important to them as well.
yeah, yeah.
Yep. Who are you at your core beyond titles and roles you play?
I I'm not sure yet. I think that I'm only 33. I think I'm still sort of figuring it out. But right now I just really want to learn so much. Like I really want to be a sponge and absorb
Mhm.
as much information and experiences as I can. And so recently, actually, in the last year, I took a course called Leadership Portland, which is pretty new here, but they run it once a year and it's a really small cohort. And we have the opportunity to learn all about our city and the problems that it's facing. And it was just really fascinating to sit down with people like the city manager and the chief of police, and each day had a different theme. So we would talk about DEI or in the environment, transportation, housing, and it was just fascinating, and it made me realize like I want to know more about our city too, and the place that I live and the state. So I'm just trying to learn as much as I can about that. Um, but I think at my core, I try to be quite a positive person and just find the joy in
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. I think it's really important to point out what you said because I think there's a lot of societal pressure to have it all figured out and to know exactly who you are. And it's okay to be in an evolutionary process as well and in a process of discovery. Um, so yeah, I'm glad that you shared that for people who are listening because yeah, we don't always have it exactly pinpointed, and the learning part of it as well is really
Yeah.
critical
Yeah.
for
I think
sure.
there's a lot of pressure, especially for women, to know exactly, where they are and what they're doing. But it's definitely okay to be unsure. I was actually creating a vision board for the year with some girlfriends the other day, and I was feeling really unsure, and I realized that that was okay. So a lot of my vision for this year is leaning into that and just sort of exploring anything that interests me, and really, yeah, just trying to learn.
That reminds me, I think sometimes in that process of coming up with a vision or some goals for yourself, one of the things that can be really helpful is to identify not necessarily a specific endpoint that you're trying to achieve, but how do you want to feel in this process of discovery? Could you talk about that a little bit for yourself?
Yeah, I think it's easy to set the end goal and to get really fixated on that, but you do miss what is going on around you. And so I think that it's just, yeah, it's important to focus on like how you want to go through your life and how you want each day to feel. Like I said, it's my dad always says this, to try and make each day a 10 out of 10.
Mhm.
And so it's focusing on what you're grateful for, and it's the small things and the big things, and really trying to embrace the journey as you go. I think that's really important.
Yeah, well, and that relates back to how you identify yourself too as being a positive person and keeping that positivity in your life for
Yeah,
sure. What are your unique strengths or qualities?
I I prefer to listen and really think things through, and I I do think that that's a strength, but it's one that I have like struggled to identify as a strength over the years, because I feel like a lot of people, myself included, you think about a successful person and stereotypically it's often a man who's really loud and
Mm,
is really the center of the room and is not thinking through all of their ideas too much. They're just throwing them out there.
blurting
And
them out. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, I'm sure that just came that idea in my head just came from society and like, the things that you see growing
Mhm.
up. But to have that in my head and then to understand how I work and that I'm quieter and I like to listen, I felt at odds with that and whether that would still be a good quality for a leader. But, like we talked about before, like listening is so important. And and it doesn't matter that like you need to take a minute to think about what you want to say. Everyone's voice matters. And so it's great when companies and leaders can recognize that and give everyone a chance to share.
For sure. You're reminding me so much about the concepts in the book, Quiet by Susan Cain. Have you read that before?
No, it's been on my list for ages and I haven't read it yet.
Well, I am actually more leaning towards extrovert, but I read that book years ago because I find my husband and my daughter and some other people in my life are much more introverted people, and I was trying to understand them and where
Yeah.
they were coming from. And she points that out in the book, that really there's this belief out there that leaders are very talkative and always expressing their opinions. And really, we should be looking for also other types of leadership that may be quieter, especially in terms of introverts. So I highly recommend it. I think there's also sometimes something to be said that the quietest person in the room might actually be the smartest person as well.
Yeah.
And you just have to take the time to talk to that person one on one, to
Yeah.
kind of get out what's there.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, s- yeah. What stories or experience have shaped who you are today?
I I think there's been a couple traveling a lot and I moved around quite a bit when I was young too. When I was 15, my parents moved us to Australia from Connecticut. And so moving at that age was hard and very uncomfortable. And
Yeah,
but I think that sort of, jump started everything else that happened after that and did strengthen my passion for travel. Um, and and then I also, when I was working in Australia and working for the restaurant group, my boss was a woman who was only a couple years older than me, but she She was a really great lead. She is a great leader. And I had seen how she had built her team for this group because when she started with them, they didn't have anyone doing marketing or events. And she was basically working out of a closet in the kitchen of one of the restaurants and starting to build this whole department for the restaurant group as they grew. And it was really inspiring to see what she had done because when I joined, I think there were four of us. And by the time I left, we had doubled. But she has a really great attitude of coming up with ideas and then being like, okay, let's just try them. Like, let's implement them. Let's see what happens. And for me, who likes to overthink things, it was
Hmm.
good to see someone like that who didn't have any fear with taking risks in business and really just trying things. Um, and so that gave me a lot of inspiration to work more that way and has sort of led me to where I am now with Uncommon Hospitality. And I am now building my own marketing department there for our hotels, which is really exciting.
Yeah.
And it's sort of I didn't know that that was where I was going to go when I was working with her in Australia, but it's been really interesting to see that sort of play out.
Yeah. What I think you're pointing out too that's important is this idea of having role models for leadership. What do you think was really important about that experience and how it's applying for you today?
I think I mean she was really open with me on what she was doing and her strategy, and it was really helpful for me to understand how she was thinking about the overall strategy and the bigger picture. And so just really like having that close contact with someone with really big ideas who was implementing them and inspiring everyone around her to be on board and to do that too was really helpful. I think that yeah, sometimes you just need to see someone doing it in your life
Right.
and understand that it's possible and that you could do it too. And she was really supportive. And we used to joke that we shared a brain because she would come up with some ideas and I could finish them. And so it was just really helpful to have someone that you can strategize with and brainstorm with and and give you a lot of advice on along the way of things that she had tried that hadn't worked. And um, I think finding a role model like that who's really open and willing to share is really powerful.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Can you describe a time when you felt most alive or fulfilled?
I I feel I feel quite fulfilled pretty often because I really love my job, which is fun. But I think there was also a time after my husband and I quit our jobs in Australia and moved back to the US. We got married and then we took my dad's Subaru and drove around the country for a while. I think we did it for 100 days, and we thought that it was going to be really easy. We thought that we knew everything there was to know about each other because we had been together for like 6 or 7 years, and we were brand new married. But we thought it was going to be no problem, and it was actually really hard. I mean, it was just the two of us in a car for a really long time. So it turned out that we needed to like understand more about how to communicate with each other and
Mhm.
communicate when we needed time alone or we needed space or I was too hungry to have a conversation or things like that. And so the first part of the trip was a little rocky and it was stressing us out more because we were on this like trip of a lifetime and it was just it wasn't
Well, then
quite
there's, like, all those high expectations too, like, "This is supposed to be perfect."
totally. And it was never gonna be perfect. I mean, we were making
Right.
mistakes, like, we booked one hotel that was so sketchy, we ended up not even being able to stay there, and we accidentally camped outside when the weather dipped below freezing, and, lots
Oh
of
my
things were
gosh.
happening to us. But but we really learned that we needed to communicate more and be honest with how we were feeling. And once we started doing that, we got into this groove, and we would just sort of plan like 2 or 3 days ahead of where we were going to be. And I think we made it to like 33 states over the 3 months, and it was just so fun. And once we really like got in sync and understood what we were doing, we could really lean into the whole trip and the experience, because being in a new place every day is also uncomfortable. But at that
Right.
point, we were like doing it together and on the same team. And um, and now looking back at it, like I'm so grateful that we did it. I don't know if I would recommend it for all newlyweds, because it's really like
Right.
it's a really hard test. But for us, it was really good, and it has made our relationship so much stronger.
Right. Well, yeah, what it sounds like is that you went through this really raw experience together and you learned a lot about the process and about each other. And in the end, you came out of it stronger as a couple, which is, yeah, that's super meaningful to have that experience together for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think communication in all areas of your life is really important.
Yeah. How have you do you think there's any lessons that you've learned from that that can be applied to what you're doing now in your role and your leadership?
I think that I think it goes back to some of the other things that we've mentioned. Like listening was really important. I needed to understand what was being said and what was not being said. Sometimes you don't want to say to your spouse, like, just leave me alone. I need some
Right.
time. But sometimes you have to be able to pick up on that. And and I think that's, similar with working with your team. You have to be able to pick up on how they're feeling and what's happening. Um, and I think it's also I think one lesson was also just not taking anything too seriously.
Mhm.
We had this big trip planned. We told everyone we knew we were doing it. We had a daily blog so that people could read what we were doing when we were doing it. And
Wow.
that might have been too much. But I mean, we're glad now that we can look back on it. But, we in the beginning, when we stayed at this one hotel where we hadn't read the reviews beforehand, and then we showed up, and it didn't feel great. There were abandoned cars in the parking lot. And then in the lobby, there was like all this signage on the wall saying, like, once you physically have the key in your hand, there will be no refund. Um,
Yikes.
it was, there were so many red flags, but we were like, oh, whatever, it's in our budget, it's gonna be fine. And then we got into the room, and it felt terrible. And then we brought up TripAdvisor, and there were all these reviews being like, do not stay here. So so we had to leave. We did not get our deposit back. But we wrote about it on our blog, and I was so frustrated and angry about the situation. And it came across in my writing too. And then the next day we had some friends and family members being like, you know, just calm down.
Right,
Everything,
right,
you're on an adventure, and things are not going to go to plan. So you have
right,
to laugh about it, pivot, figure out what's next. But yeah.
right, yeah. I mean, I wanna point out something you said earlier too about the lessons that you took away from that experience with your husband regarding that honesty and being candid with people. I think we can often, like, kind of walk around on eggshells, not wanting to, like, ruffle anybody's feathers, but that's just kind of sweeping things under the rug, which might cause later problems. So
Yeah.
that's a really critical part of communication as well.
Yeah, that's hard. And I think it's also like being okay with confrontation, which is another
Mhm.
skill that's really difficult. And I can't remember if I heard this at Accelerate last year, but I was at a conference, and we were talking about goals, and there was a woman who said, I want to to be like the opposite of anti-confrontation. Like I want to lean into confrontation and I want to know
Mm-hmm.
how to do that. And I had never thought about it that way, but I think that's really powerful to not be afraid of it, but to say, okay, it's going to happen. I need to be okay with it and
Right.
learn
Well,
to
and doing it constructively,
right.
right? And not and in a way that connects you with people rather than, creates more disconnection. I think
Right.
that's the ultimate goal for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I think there's a good way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. What do you stand for no matter what?
um, I I believe in, everyone having a voice and getting a chance, no matter what their work style or communication style is, figuring out ways to empower everyone to have a voice. It's something that we talk about a lot at Uncommon Hospitality. Finding ways for everyone to give us feedback, so that it's not just decisions from the top level. We want everyone to give us feedbacks and to understand, what they enjoy about their job, what they don't. And I
Mhm.
think that's really important. Um, I also I think that finding joy is
Mhm.
is just really important. I was at a conference last year about courageous leadership, that was run by ESA Business School and MIT. And there was a woman there named Hala, and I don't want to attempt her last name because she's from Iceland, but she ran for the president of Iceland, and she told the
Mhm.
story of her race. And she was up against a bunch of odds. She was running against all males, and the men were getting a lot more media coverage. She was like not getting invited to the debates, and she was really having a hard time running.
Mhm.
And I think it was like 2 months or so before the end of the race, she was in last place. And so she decided to like refocus her mindset and remember why she was running. She was running to be of service and to remind herself how she wanted to run. And she talked
Mm.
about wanting to be really open. But she also said that, when she started this, she wanted to make sure she enjoyed the journey. And
Mhm.
I remember when she said that so clearly, it was like a little light bulb in my head went off. And I was like, yes, everything is supposed to be fun. I mean, there should be
Right.
some joy in everything. Even though it's your going to work every day, there should be a little bit of fun in there too. And so I ended up taking that inspiration when we created our values for Uncommon Hospitality last year. And one of our three core values is embrace the journey and have fun, because I just think it's really important. And and yeah, it's you have to focus on it, but it can be there.
Yeah. Can you I love that how you put that inspiration into something meaningful in your workplace. Can you explain or give some examples of how do you bring that value of embracing the journey and in a joyful way? How do you bring that to life in your organization?
So I think the way that we describe it, it's embrace the journey. So have fun, be brave, take risks, and create relationships.
Mhm.
And so we really encourage everyone to to come up with ideas that are going to add a little bit of fun. And one of the ways that our general manager did it at one of the hotels, she worked with the housekeeping team, because she wanted to encourage them to have some more fun during their day. And so she started encouraging them to create towel animals or towel art in all
Mhm.
of their rooms. And uh, and the team got really into it. Like they were watching YouTube videos on how to make different
Oh.
beautiful swans and elephants and horseshoe crabs and everything. And then she also encouraged them to use like the tip envelopes in each room. They could put as many stickers as they wanted on them. They could draw all over them. and just add some personality. So, it just added something lighthearted and interesting that everyone on that team looked forward to. And so we started sharing
Yeah.
it all on social media too, which was a lot of fun. Um, so it sort of, yeah, it creates like a ripple effect where, if you can see people on the team having fun, it encourages you to do the same.
Yeah. And what do you think the impact was for the individual team members?
I think it added a lot of positivity. There most of the protocols that we have in the housekeeping department are very straightforward. There's not a lot of room for creativity or for people to
Mm.
change things up. And so it just really it added them to it allowed them to add their personality in there and have some creativity. And I think that that really helps with the overall team morale and the positivity there.
Oh, that's great. Like you were really creating some space for them to be themselves and to bring themselves to work in that example, and to put some of their personality in it, like you said. That's really wonderful. That's a great example. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
When have you underestimated yourself?
Um, Often. uh, I mean,
We all, as we
yeah,
all.
exactly. I think we talked about this at Accelerate last year, and I feel like a few of the women mentioned that we all have that voice in our head that is saying the opposite of what we want to hear. And
Mhm.
uh, I think someone said that they gave that voice a name, and
Oh, yeah.
I, I loved that because yeah, I mean, you can just sort of tell it to be quiet and focus on the more positive voices in your head.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely hear that voice in my head, but I keep just sort of focusing on what I want to do and where I'm going, and keep putting myself out there. Um, there was one instance where as we're developing this new hotel that we're opening in Portland called the Longfellow. One other thing that I'm quite passionate about is period poverty because it's a problem everywhere. Not everyone has enough access to feminine products, to pads and tampons, and I had been learning more about that and learning more about the stigma about periods, which
Mhm.
is something that we all know. Nobody likes to talk about them,
Right.
but but I wanted to like do a small part in trying to combat that stigma, and so I decided I was going to ask if we could put pads and tampons in every restroom in the Longfellow Hotel. And
Mhm.
I was a bit nervous to do that. I mean, my bosses are men. They're great, and it wasn't a problem at all, but it's still walking into a room and being like, "Hey, can we please order
Yeah.
pads and tampons?" Um, it was yeah, I wasn't sure how it was going to go, and I was underestimating myself. But yeah, it was a great conversation, and my bosses just said, "Yeah, great. How many should we order to start?" And that was it. So
Wow. Oh, that's such a purposeful example that you bring up. There's so much in that, and I love how you described, okay, how do you kind of combat this idea of underestimating yourself? And what you're really talking about is that inner critic, right? Speaking in your head. Do you have a name for your inner critic?
I sort of think of it sort of as a gremlin, but it
Right.
doesn't have a
Right.
name.
So you just tell that gremlin to simmer down and be quiet, and you drum up, it sounds like you drum up some courage and bravery and just say, "Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try this out and see what happens."
Yeah.
And I think what happens when you do that, the more that you push yourself to quiet that voice, go after something that go after one of those goals, even if you feel scared or fearful about it, that you when you have those successes, it builds that confidence and that you can be even stronger to face the next, big thing that you're feeling doubt about.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely helps to be able to remind yourself of the wins. I have like a folder on my desktop on my computer called Gold Star. And so when I get like good feedback in writing too, I take a screenshot and I put it in there. And then if I like
Oh,
really need a confidence boost, I'll have a look at those and just remind myself.
oh, good for you for doing that. We need those reminders because as humans, we have the tendency to focus on the negative things.
Yeah.
So that's a great example of a practice to use for that. What impact do you strive to have in the travel industry?
I would love to see more women in leadership. There, there are a lot of women in the hospitality industry, but as you get closer to the top, especially the C-suite level, there are still far too few women at that level in this industry. And so, I'm a part of great programs like Accelerate and Women in Travel Thrive, who I've found some great mentors through as well, and Women Leading Travel and Hospitality. So I want to continue to be a part of those and encourage more people to continue moving up in this industry. Um,
Yeah. What
and
you're identifying is like, sorry to cut you off, but what you're identifying is this idea of being part of different kinds of communities. What has been the impact for you of that?
I think like having my mentor when I was younger, it's just seeing women who are doing it, and being able to talk to them. It's just so powerful to just see other women who have been where you are and have worked their way up and are now, especially women who are now in these communities, trying to encourage younger people too.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really powerful just to see that it can be done.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That idea of representation, and seeing yourself potentially in somebody else at a higher level, it's super critical for sure. And sorry, I cut you off before. I think you were going to say something else regarding your impact on the industry.
Yeah, I also with the company that I work for, it's a small family company, and I think that they're trying to do something really special. We developed our values last year. We have our purpose statement, which is to deliver exceptional hospitality. But the company, we also have a people charter. And so that means when anyone starts to work with us, we have a list of 10 things that they can expect to feel when they work with us. And so it's our way of saying,
Mm,
you will feel heard, you will feel respected, you will have some fun, you will have a voice, and I don't know that many other companies that have that. I think that's really important, and so Uncommon is really trying to. Our goal is to make sure all of our team members feel as fulfilled as the guests who come and stay at our hotels,
hmm.
and I think that's really important. So I'm excited to be really building that with the team at Uncommon because we have some really rapid growth coming up over the next few years with more hotels. So I think that this
Wonderful.
is a company that is going to do really exciting things.
Yeah. Well, you're building a really strong foundation with things like, having clear values and purpose. That's really important for building that culture as you go through that transition and growth for sure. What leadership skill do you most rely on to lead people and teams?
There's two that I have. The first one is clear communication. I think that you need to set clear expectations, and how you need to know how to give people feedback. I think that's important. But I also like to communicate the why of what we're doing.
Mm,
So with each of the hotels, we have an orientation near the start of the season where I go and talk to them about, what the hotel is, But then we also go look at a bunch of reviews and feedback from guests about the experience that they had with us and what they felt when they were there and who they came with and why they were coming. And that really is a reminder of why we do what we do. It's to be able to create these memorable travel experiences for the people that come and stay at our hotels. And so, everything else falls along behind that. So, when I'm setting up different promotions for the marketing department, or we're trying to throw different parties or do different things, I can come back and say, why we're doing this. It's because we're working to create something memorable for our guests.
Yeah. What do you think is specifically important about communicating that why?
I think the purpose is just really powerful. Otherwise, you're just going to a job each day and spending your hours there without really knowing why you're doing what you're doing. I think
Right.
it puts everyone on the same team to know that we're working together to create experiences, and people come and stay with us for all different reasons. Sometimes it's just a fun vacation, but sometimes it's like an escape.
Right.
And in Unreasonable Hospitality, which is a book that I love, Will Guidara, he talks about a meal that he went to with his father in New York when he was young, and his mother was really unwell. And so they went to this really fancy dinner. And he just realized, it was a couple of hours where they were being taken care of and other people were serving them. And it was an opportunity for them to be taken care of. And I think it
Right.
was something that they really needed. So
Yeah. So it's really about connecting people to the bigger picture of, what are we trying to create for people at a higher level,
yeah,
just beyond the kind of day-to-day things that we do of serving a meal, for
yeah,
example.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
wonderful.
and then the other skill that I think is important is courage. I think that great
Mm,
leaders need to have a lot of courage because it's really hard. And
yeah,
you need to take risks and inspire people and build the culture and connect with people and know yourself really well. So I think that that's really important.
absolutely. Absolutely. So we're about to come to the end, but I would really love to know about what vision would you pursue if you had everything you needed to succeed right now?
If I had everything I needed to succeed, I would really keep doing what I'm doing now. I love what I'm doing. I would love to know everything there is to know about hospitality marketing. And maybe one day I will get there. But I just really want to keep growing Uncommon Hospitality. I want to grow my department and grow the overall company. And I also really want to have an impact on the tourism industry in Maine.
Mhm.
I have been sort of leaning into that a little bit more lately too. At the city level and the state level, I think we have opportunities to encourage more people to come here, to focus more on workforce development. We have a lot of asylum seekers that come to Maine, and if we have more ways to encourage them to get into the hospitality industry, I think that that can be really beneficial and powerful. And Maine is also one of the whitest states in the country. I think we're second if we're not first. And there's a lot that can be done on the tourism side to encourage more people to come here. And I want to get more involved in that and figure out how that can be done too.
That's great. Well, very inspiring, and you're well on your way, it sounds like, to being a really important contributor to our industry. It's been wonderful chatting with you today, Ali, and I wish you all the best in your next pursuits and with the growth of Uncommon Hospitality. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, I'm Rachel Vandenberg, and this is the Travel Leader Podcast.